If you compare images of Akhenaten, other depictions of pharaohs, you'll notice that Akhenaten looks very different.
What if everything you've ever believed about one of history's most famous pharaohs was wrong? For more than 3,000 years, the world imagined this ruler as a fearless warrior with a powerful jaw and a commanding presence. Textbooks, paintings, and documentaries all repeated the same image. But hidden beneath ancient sands, silent statues told a completely different story, one that almost no one dared to believe. Then, inside a secure laboratory in Cairo, scientists extracted ancient DNA from a royal mummy. What they discovered didn't just change a face. It challenged centuries of history. A stunning facial reconstruction revealed features that shocked archaeologists, historians, and forensic experts alike. The king's appearance was unlike anything the world had expected, raising a question that could rewrite an entire chapter of ancient Egypt. Who was this mysterious pharaoh really? Why was his true appearance hidden for thousands of years? And what other secrets have been buried beneath history's greatest civilization? Stay with us until the very end, because the final discovery is the most astonishing of all. And before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. You won't want to miss the incredible evidence you're about to see. Walk into any museum storage room where surviving pieces of this mysterious pharaoh are kept, and an uneasy feeling settles in almost instantly. Even experienced curators speak about him with unusual caution, while visitors often sense that something is different before they can explain why. Fragments of statues recovered from ruined temples still preserve the same unforgettable face: high, sharply defined cheekbones, heavy eyelids that seem weighed down with exhaustion, unusually wide lips, and a body whose features blur the familiar line between masculine and feminine. These were never the perfect godlike images that Egyptian kings usually demanded. Instead, they appear to portray one real human being with striking honesty, leaving almost everyone with the same unsettling impression that something about him simply doesn't seem right. These statues once stood proudly in the very heart of ancient Egypt, representing a ruler unlike any before him. His name was Akhenaten, and during the 13th year of his reign, he made a decision that would shake the foundations of an entire civilization. He ordered every temple dedicated to Amun to be closed. To understand the scale of that decision, you have to remember that Amun was not just another Egyptian god. He was the supreme deity of the kingdom, worshipped by generations of pharaohs, including Akhenaten's own father. The priests of Amun had crowned kings for centuries, controlled enormous wealth, and influenced nearly every aspect of Egyptian life. Yet with a single royal command, Akhenaten stripped them of their power. Ancient records dating to around 1353 to 1352 BCE describe how temple estates were seized, priestly wealth was confiscated, and thousands of workers suddenly found themselves without a purpose. Religious celebrations that had shaped everyday life for centuries, even before the pyramids were built, came to an abrupt end. But the king's revolution did not stop there. He erased his own birth name, Amenhotep, from monuments throughout Egypt and replaced it with a new name devoted entirely to the Aten, the radiant sun disk. Soon afterward, he abandoned the great city of Thebes altogether, leading the royal court into untouched desert land where an entirely new capital would rise. 14 massive boundary markers were carved into the surrounding cliffs, permanently defining the borders of this extraordinary city. This was far more than a simple religious reform. Akhenaten was dismantling the spiritual foundation of one of the most deeply religious civilizations in history, openly challenging traditions that had survived for thousands of years. The new capital, Akhenaten, meaning the horizon of the Aten, was constructed with astonishing speed. Within less than 2 years, magnificent open-air temples filled the landscape, designed so sunlight itself could flood every sacred space. Every inscription honored only one god, while every monument proclaimed the king as Aten's chosen representative on earth. The old gods disappeared into silence. Yet the most astonishing feature of this new city was not the disappearance of Egypt's traditional gods. It was the king's own appearance. Everywhere people looked, they found Akhenaten's face carved into walls, statues, and monuments unlike anything Egyptian artists had ever created before. His proportions ignored nearly 3,000 years of artistic tradition, as though something about the ruler himself had fundamentally changed. For the first time, sculptors seemed free to portray him exactly as they saw him. The question was, what had changed? Fragments of a surviving royal decree instructed artists to abandon the idealized style that had defined Egyptian art for centuries. They were no longer to create the image of a perfect warrior or a flawless god. Instead, they were commanded to show the king exactly as he appeared in real life. The statues they produced remain among the most haunting works of ancient art ever discovered. Imagine standing before one of them. An elongated skull stretches dramatically backward. Narrow shoulders slope downward. Broad hips extend wider than those of any previous pharaoh, even wider than many queens. A rounded stomach hangs over the royal kilt, while enlarged breasts appear openly in massive temple sculptures, something no earlier Egyptian king had ever allowed. Long, delicate fingers, a remarkably slender neck, flat-looking feet, and a face balanced somewhere between masculine and feminine, almost impossible to define. It is the kind of image that holds your attention because your mind instinctively tells you that something about it doesn't belong. The same extraordinary features appear throughout the royal family. Painted reliefs show Akhenaten's daughters with elongated heads, thin limbs, rounded bodies, and identical facial proportions, as though one unusual physical trait had been inherited through the royal bloodline. Beside the king stands Nefertiti, portrayed with the same extended skull, the same powerful jawline, and the same impossibly graceful neck. Every wall inside Akhenaten became a gallery devoted to these mysterious faces. Foreign ambassadors who traveled to Egypt expecting the familiar splendor of a royal court, instead walked through halls covered with images unlike anything they had ever seen. Imagine being an experienced diplomat standing before the most powerful ruler on earth, only to find him deliberately presenting himself in such an unfamiliar form, without offering a single explanation. Many returned home convinced the pharaoh had lost his mind. For centuries afterward, historians struggled to understand these remarkable images. Were they purely symbolic, expressing a ruler who believed he embodied both masculine and feminine powers of creation? Or were Akhenaten's artists preserving something real, something so extraordinary that it continues to puzzle the world even today? For years, historians argued over one question that refused to disappear. Were Akhenaten's unusual statues simply political symbolism, created to separate his new religion from Egypt's ancient traditions? Or were they revealing something far more personal, something about the king's real physical appearance that artists had finally been allowed to portray honestly? For decades, that second possibility remained the most controversial, and few scholars were willing to discuss it openly. The reason was obvious. Egyptian royal art had followed the same sacred formula for nearly 2,000 years. Every pharaoh was shown as physically perfect, powerful, and divine. Gods were never depicted with soft bodies, broad hips, or human imperfections. These rules were not created for artistic beauty. They were part of Egypt's religious belief system. Ignoring them wasn't simply changing an artistic style, it was exposing something deeply personal. By allowing himself to be portrayed so differently, Akhenaten seemed to be revealing a truth about himself that no king before him had dared acknowledge. After his death, later rulers and priests spent centuries trying to erase every trace of that truth from history. Before we uncover what they tried so desperately to hide beneath thousands of years of desert sand, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because the evidence you're about to see explains why a face like Akhenaten's could never be allowed to survive. The mystery only deepened when another royal discovery shocked the archaeological world. In 1922, the tomb of Tutankhamun was opened inside the Valley of the Kings, revealing the famous golden mask that has become one of history's most recognizable treasures. Yet unlike Akhenaten's portraits, Tutankhamun's face appeared flawless, perfectly balanced, youthful, and entirely traditional. Every unusual feature had vanished. It was as though the artists of the next generation had immediately abandoned Akhenaten's strange style and returned to the ancient rules that had guided Egyptian art for centuries. That sudden change raised an obvious question. If Akhenaten had insisted on showing his true appearance, why did everyone after him work so hard to erase it? Part of the answer may have been hiding inside a damaged tomb discovered years earlier. When archaeologists uncovered the burial now known as KV55 in 1907, they found a chamber that had been deliberately destroyed. The coffin had been vandalized, royal names carefully erased, and the golden face covering the coffin had been ripped away. Someone in ancient Egypt had gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure the identity of the person buried there would never be remembered. But while inscriptions had been destroyed, the skeleton itself still remained. Its unusually elongated skull, slender frame, and distinctive jaw closely resembled the mysterious features carved into Akhenaten's statues. Interestingly, none of these characteristics fell outside the range of normal human variation, a fact that fueled decades of disagreement among doctors, archaeologists, and historians. Some believed the king suffered from Marfan syndrome. Others suggested hormonal disorders, gynecomastia, pituitary disease, childhood trauma, or other rare medical conditions. Another group insisted the artwork was purely symbolic, and that Akhenaten had looked completely ordinary in real life. Every theory attracted supporters, and every theory eventually ran into serious contradictions. Eventually, researchers realized the answer would never be found by studying statues alone. The search moved from chisels and carved stone to microscopes, DNA sequencing, and one of Egypt's most secure scientific laboratories. Modern genetics was about to examine evidence that had remained silent for over 3,000 years. Egyptologist Zahi Hawass had promised that ancient DNA could finally settle the debate, despite widespread skepticism from scientists who believed Egypt's climate had destroyed any surviving genetic material. Working alongside geneticist Yahya Gad, the research team spent nearly 2 years developing testing procedures strict enough to satisfy experts around the world. They knew that if even one mistake slipped into the process, critics would dismiss the entire field of ancient Egyptian DNA research for years to come. 11 royal mummies were carefully selected for the project, including Tutankhamun, the mysterious KV55 mummy, the unidentified royal woman known as the Younger Lady, and 8 additional members of the same dynasty whose relationships had long been debated. Every specimen was transferred under tightly controlled security procedures, and researchers collected samples only from teeth and dense bone, where ancient DNA remains best preserved. Members of the laboratory later recalled how Yahya Gad would quietly pause for a moment before placing each sample into the sequencing machine, treating every mummy with extraordinary care. Every result was independently verified through blind testing before it was accepted. Scientists examined mitochondrial DNA to trace maternal ancestry, Y chromosome markers to follow the paternal line, and autosomal DNA to measure exact family relationships. Statistical models compared every result with modern Egyptian population data, and the complete methods were later published in one of the world's leading medical journals, allowing researchers everywhere to examine the evidence for themselves. When the final genetic results arrived, they transformed one of history's greatest royal mysteries. After millions of DNA base pairs had been analyzed and repeatedly verified, the evidence revealed that the KV-55 mummy was Tutankhamun's biological father, while the younger lady was confirmed as his biological mother. At first, that discovery seemed completely expected for an Egyptian royal family. But the investigation didn't stop there. When scientists analyzed the relationship between those two parents, the results became astonishing. They discovered that KV-55 and the younger lady shared the same father and the same mother. They were not distant relatives, cousins, or even half-siblings. They were full biological brother and sister who had married each other and produced Tutankhamun. The statistical probability that this conclusion was wrong was virtually impossible. Understanding how extraordinary those findings would be, the research team repeated the analysis 3 separate times before publishing the results, fully aware that once the evidence became public, one of ancient Egypt's darkest royal secrets would never be hidden again. For the first time in more than 3,000 years, the royal family of ancient Egypt could finally be reconstructed with scientific certainty. No longer based on damaged inscriptions or flattering royal records, the family tree was confirmed by DNA itself. The results revealed that Tutankhamun, the young king whose golden mask became the symbol of ancient Egypt, was the son of a full brother and sister. That discovery changed everything. It meant the strange appearance carved into Akhenaten statues could no longer be dismissed as artistic symbolism alone. Scientists could now compare the genetic evidence with the physical remains and finally attempt something no one had dared to do for millennia: rebuild the face of the king himself. Using the skull believed to belong to Akhenaten, researchers reconstructed the features hidden beneath centuries of mystery. The elongated head, prominent cheekbones, broad jaw, heavy eyelids, long neck, and unusually soft facial structure matched the ancient statues with remarkable accuracy. The reconstruction revealed not a mythical figure or an exaggerated work of art, but a real human being whose appearance had been faithfully preserved by his own artists. For generations, people believed those statues represented symbolism. Modern science suggested something very different. They reflected reality. The genetic evidence also helped explain the tragic fate of Akhenaten's son. CT scans of Tutankhamun's body showed that he suffered from numerous congenital disorders. He was born with a clubfoot that made walking extremely difficult, missing bones in one foot, spinal abnormalities, and other skeletal problems that caused constant pain. Archaeologists discovered more than 130 walking sticks inside his tomb, many worn smooth from regular use, proving they were not ceremonial objects, but essential tools that supported him throughout his short life. The image of the young king racing into battle was a royal illusion. In reality, he likely depended on those walking sticks every single day. DNA analysis uncovered another devastating detail. Tutankhamun carried multiple infections of Plasmodium falciparum, the parasite responsible for the deadliest form of malaria. Combined with his inherited health problems, the repeated infections overwhelmed his body. He died at only 19 years old, leaving behind no surviving heir to continue the royal bloodline. The deeper scientists looked, the clearer the pattern became. For generations, Egypt's royal family had practiced marriages between close relatives to preserve what they believed was sacred blood. They considered royal blood to be divine and feared that marrying outside the family would weaken their claim to the throne. But biology followed different rules. With every generation of close intermarriage, harmful recessive genes became more likely to appear. Modern genetics shows that children born to full siblings face dramatically higher risks of inherited disorders, and the evidence preserved in these royal mummies reflects exactly that. Akhenaten's unusual appearance may have been the first visible warning. Tutankhamun became the devastating consequence. What was intended to protect the dynasty slowly weakened it from within until the royal line finally collapsed. After Tutankhamun's death, the throne passed to rulers who were not direct descendants of the royal family, bringing one of Egypt's greatest dynasties to an end. In the end, DNA accomplished something archaeology alone never could. It didn't simply identify a family, it revealed the hidden story behind their rise and fall. The strange face carved into temple walls was not a mistake, nor merely an artistic choice. It reflected the biological reality of a dynasty that spent generations protecting its bloodline until that very decision became its greatest weakness. 3,000 years after priests tried to erase Akhenaten from history, science finally gave him back his face, and with it, the truth they had tried so hard to bury beneath the sands of Egypt. In the end, please subscribe to our channel and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers.